Hello and welcome to this very hastily made video. As you may have seen from the social media posts, this month's video should have been an interview. However, due to circumstances, that's had to change at last minute. So, today's video is something I whipped up quickly to fill the gap, while also providing some more information on the series. I would like to add a disclaimer here that I know next to nothing about the composition of music, and therefore I do not know all the terminology. Without further ado, I present the music that inspired BioWar. The goal today is to talk a little more about some of the musical inspirations for different aspects of BioWar, be it characters, scenes, concepts or entire battles, and I will be talking through and giving examples of these today. The first tracks. As we have previously discussed, BioWar started as a university creative writing assessment, and because of this, I only rarely listened to music that was suited to William's first chapter in Paris. The Siege of Paris is a chaotic mess of aircraft, tanks and bioweapons, burning buildings and flak darkening the skies over this massive siege. Every aspect of this prototype chapter, from the larger battle right down to William's own vehicle, gave the impression of huge forces at play, even down to William's own physical prowess on the battlefield. I needed a song that would reflect this. Tiger Hunt from Call of Duty World War II was my go-to track. The heavy brass and overall sense of dread coming from this track perfectly fit with the siege that William was helping to lift. When Henry came on the scene with his wingmen, I required something that would reflect the intensity of the battle, while also complementing the overconfidence and higher morale of the newly trained pilots of the RAF's first attack squadron. The natural choice for this was initially the one and only Showdown from Project Wingman. The high energy of this track was ideal for the adrenaline-fueled, fast-paced action that Henry and his wingmen faced during the battle. The choice of instruments and the overall lighter feel of the track better reflected the pilot's detachment from the heavier tones of the battle on the ground, giving more of an impression that Henry, Lillian and Arthur had not experienced nor had any real sense of how desperate the situation was on the ground. These three pilots are focused on completing their mission and becoming aces by the end of the week. What is happening on the ground is almost an entirely different world to them. However, when the RAF come to the rescue for William, I wanted a track to represent them from the ground perspective, something that would represent the horrors of the battle on the ground, while portraying the hope that the troops feel when their air support eventually arrives. The answer came in the form of Last Stand, a track from Tom Clancy's Hawks 2. That retained some of the less harsh instrumentation of Tiger Hunt, but with a little more desperation to it than Showdown. Although this was only used for a very short scene within William's first chapter, it's certainly an important moment that I wanted to associate a track with. Mid-war. As the story began to pick up pace, more and more tracks were used for various scenes throughout the story. Some characters ended up with their own theme songs, which I will cover in a future video. and I continued to associate different tracks with different perspectives of each battle. To demonstrate this, I have chosen a battle part where, partway through the book, the Second Ardennes Offensive, in order to showcase some of these tracks and how the concepts evolved. The first of these tracks was for the 1st Royal Commando Squad, following the perspective of sniper Charlie Harolds. For writing this scene, I needed a track that was quietly disturbing, jarring enough to create a sense of urgency, while reflecting the fact that the battle had yet to start. The answer came in the form of Cathedral. Originally composed for Zombie Army Trilogy, one of the primary inspirations for BioWar, this piece of music had the perfect mix of horror and tension for the Royal Commandos as they snuck behind the defences of the bioweapons. Similar tracks from this game series were used for various stages of the battle, primarily when large quantities of bio-soldiers were present for the scene. A good example of this is The Village. The faster tempo and increased usage of heavier instruments adjusts the balance from the last track, from a less subtle tone to a more action-based one. Also included in the chapters surrounding this battle were some of the songs I had selected as character themes. At several points in William's perspective of the Ardennes, for example, I used Shepherd of Fire. Originally used in the Call of Duty Zombies Origins trailer, it's clear where some of the inspiration for William's actions came from, along with why this became his theme. In contrast to this, Carl Bell's various themes were used throughout his chapter in the Ardennes. The changes in tracks reflecting the scene being written. Letting go of his need for restraint during the first half of this chapter, I used Rules of Nature. Originally composed for the famed Metal Gear Rising game, the similarities between the context of the song and Carl's position in this scene are parallel. Though I can't explain this in too much detail, Carl's discovery that his restraint is his only limit in this chapter leads him to mercilessly cut down every bioweapon of any size in his path, representing a shift in the balance of power. Bioweapons are no longer the most dangerous threat. This is reflected by the scene in Metal Gear Rising that Rules of Nature originally accompanies. A show of force from the protagonist Raiden that highlights the end of battlefield dominance for the Metal Gears developed over the course of the Metal Gear Solid series. For similar reasons, Carl's track later switches to Play the Hero from the game Guilty Gear Strive, reflecting the shift from unrestricted violence to the more precise and restrained fighting style of later scenes. The final battle. This one is going to be hard to describe without giving away some massive spoilers. However, I will do my best to talk about this in as vague a way as possible. For the finale of the book, from Carl's perspective, I chose to write the scene to The Gift from Call of Duty Zombies. This song was the ideal form of organised chaos for the fight I was writing, representing the evolution of not just Carl's fighting capabilities, but also of him as a person. For the other protagonists, I tended to stick with It Has to Be This Way, again composed for Metal Gear Rising. Not only does this track have that grandiose feeling about it, but also represents the mindset of William during the battle. He knows that the bioweapons are driven primarily by feeding and survival instincts, just as humans are. but knows that this is incompatible with the survival of the human race. For Henry, however, I needed something a little different. Showdown was no longer the right piece of music for the scene, since Henry and his wingmen had matured over the events of the book and had become more focused on their mission and less so on seeking glory. To represent this, I went for Waltz of the Tornado from the second volume of the War Thunder soundtrack. The mixture of instruments in this track, coupled with the fast tempo and choice of instruments, showed, for me at least, the change in both the battle space and the mindsets of the pilots. Conclusion time. As much as I'd like to talk all day about this and go through every single song on every playlist I have for the series, that would take more time than we have. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments section or on the social media pages. As some last notifications, I have now finally begun looking for a publisher. With some help, I have located one or two that I would like to begin pestering soon. So updates on that will be provided when I have some news for you. Also, due to the delays in the videos, the Drawing Carl Art Challenge deadline has been extended to the beginning of August. All those hundreds of artists that have been toiling away on huge portfolios of Carl can finally breathe a sigh of relief. On a similar note, the script for Henry and his wingman's video is finished, and I am currently waiting for one final piece to make the video that extra bit more interesting. Thanks to Captain Spades, linked to their Twitter in the description, who is putting in a lot of hard work to make this a reality. And that's it for this month. As always, stay tuned for more updates, and I shall see you next month so we can discuss the aces of the 1st Attack Squadron.